Sitting on the beach under an umbrella is more therapeutic than I could have imagined. My flight landed perfectly, and after checking into my hotel, I headed to the beach. That was yesterday. I made it to my cabin where I had dinner, went through the entire liquor cabinet, and went to bed. This morning I had coffee, had a light breakfast of pastries, and came straight back here to the beach. My friends were always posting pictures on Facebook of lounge chairs by the blue water and the white sand beach. I would see them and think, yeah, that would be great. As I sat here and now, I realized that those pictures could never capture the peacefulness I felt. A nice warm breeze was blowing and it was 83 degrees outside. The spot I chose was a semi-private beach, so all the public beachgoers were much farther away from me. I could see little dots of people from afar, but they didn't interfere with my tranquility. The waves were small but constant, with occasional bigger waves that rose high enough to crest. The white plume of spray from these waves made a wonderful splashing sound. The sand was clean and the water was clear as glass. I could stare at it for hours, and almost no thoughts passed through my exhausted brain except the beauty that was before me. In the distance, over the water, a few clouds could be seen. Behind me, around the beach hut, were dozens of large and proud palm trees surrounded by what seemed to be very large northwest rhododendrons. I saw pink, purple, white, and even red flowers on these plants. Color was everywhere here. Of course, all good things come to an end. As I sat there, my phone beeped once. I checked it, and it was a text message from Maddie. Love and miss you, Daddy. Please give me a call. Hope to see you soon. Love, Maddie. This simple message brought tears to my eyes. I would do anything for my little girl, but I guess the one thing she wanted, I couldn't give. She wanted her perfect family back. Unfortunately, she's not alone. I wish I could have it all back too, but we're nowhere near what we used to be. I sent her a text back. I love you too, baby. Just trying to relax. I'll call you tonight, I promise. Love you more. The only thing I had to keep in mind was the time difference. Since she lived on the East Coast and I lived in Hawaii, there was at least a 6 to 7 hour time zone difference between us. I'll have to double check that. With that message, my perfect beach day was postponed. I got up and wandered back to the cabin. For the first time in a long time, I had nothing to do. I mean, literally, no one was expecting me to do anything, and no one was depending on me. I had no job to rush to, no urgent meetings or calls to make. The feeling was both extremely liberating and a little disorienting at the same time. However, I wasn't going to be overzealous in my job search. I decided that I would adopt the philosophy of one of my favorite cartoon characters, the Hakuna Matata. I was once told that, roughly translated, it means no worries. Thank you, Timon and Pumbaa, for letting me steal your saying. I chuckled to myself, remembering my inside joke. I made myself a sandwich and a fruit cup from the food I found in the fridge. It was the best vacation of my life. Unfortunately, it led me to think that he should have been with Caitlin. Well, geez, just thinking about it made me feel bad. I had successfully kept her and our situation from entering my brain for almost an entire day, but now it was bursting back in with force. Before the day got even more shitty, I turned to the liquor cabinet. It too was completely full. When one is in paradise, one must enjoy all that is provided. Perhaps I should copyright this. It could make a decent Hallmark-style postcard. Nevertheless, I found what I was looking for and pulled out a bottle. I poured at least a shot or two into a large cup, added the fruit juice from the unlabeled bottle, and stirred. It probably smelled like pineapple, but whatever it was, it tasted great. I'd have to ask what kind of juice it was so I could buy more later. I put a straw in my glass, grabbed my lunch, and walked back down the beach to sit in a lounge chair. Sitting in it, I raised my glass to the blue sky, to the memory of my marriage. I set it down and took a long sip. The sky didn't toast back, but I think it understood me. Maybe I was starting to lose my temper a little at a time, but either way, I figured it would be okay. I calmly ate my lunch. Once I was done with it, I decided it was time to take at least a few minutes to be productive. I needed to make some calls to tie up the loose ends that were still left. I needed to call Sandra and Tony to settle any legal issues at home. In addition, there was still the question of where to live. Time for call number 1. I hoped Tony was still in his office. I dialed his number and it rang 3 times before he answered. Tony here. Is this you, James? Yes, it's me. So, any news on my situation? To some extent, yes. I filed a motion with the court to revoke his status as a partner. The judge has temporarily put it on hold because Cyrus has only been charged but not convicted. In addition, the feds demanded copies of all business records due to Cyrus and his side business. The good news is that Cyrus avoided bail. He was supposed to appear at his hearing today, but he missed it. That's very good for your case and a possible sale. I'm still interested in that guy on the West Coast once this Cyrus mess is cleared up. You should get the letter today with the power of attorney we discussed. Okay, I'll forward it to you as soon as I get it. As for the sale and the Cyrus situation, keep me posted. We both hung up, wasting no time saying goodbye. So the idiot bailed, huh? What's next? Is he going to rob a bank? How the hell did I not see all his flaws before I got involved with him? They were always there, but I didn't seem to notice them. Another life lesson, I guess. After another sip, the drink began to taste pleasant. Before I could make another call, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. The caller ID said it was Kurt Simpson, wondering what he wanted. Hello, this is James. Mr. Holmes, this is Kurt Simpson. We were watching your wife's house last night and we have something to tell you. Go on, I said, interested. I was sitting about 2 houses away when a dark silver BMW pulled up to your driveway at about 9 o'clock this evening. I took pictures, but I can tell you for sure it was your partner Cyrus Black. He came to the door and was let in without any altercation. I couldn't determine what was said. He paused, waiting for me to respond. I had nothing to reply. All I could think was that the bastard had come back for more. How long had this been going on? How the hell did I not notice it? I thought we were happy, but that seemed to explain something about my wife's behavior since this whole thing started. Carry on, I said with that calmness that only comes after a good rum. I sipped some more as I listened. I watched the house all night, and he left around 7 in the morning. When he left, I followed him for a bit and noticed him heading to a small motel about 2 miles away. I left after he went inside. Thanks, Kurt. You've helped me more than you can imagine. You may not tail her now, but I want to ask, did you get pictures or any evidence of last night? My lawyer might need it. Also, make sure you get his location to the cops. I hear he's out on bail and they're looking for him. I grinned. He must be stupid not to bail out and hide better. That's good for him. Yeah, I took some pictures. I didn't think you'd want to know or see them, but I managed to get a decent shot through the window of them together. I'll send them to your lawyer. As for turning him into the police again, you've done that. There's one more thing. We looked into what the ATF found, and it turns out Cyrus was working with one Christopher Hood, a government employee. The feds are staying silent on this, but it seems to me that this is another dirty politician. Son of a bitch. Did the asshole at FEMA work with Cyrus too? The hole is getting deeper. I could run into Alice at any moment. Wow, well, thanks for the news, Kurt. I was just stunned. You're welcome. James, I'm really sorry about that. I hate it when good people are treated like crap. It's one of the reasons I do what I do. I try to bring at least a modicum of justice into people's lives. Thank you. We ended the conversation. Well, wasn't that bullshit? It was already making some sense, though. He wasn't just trying to drive a wedge between me and my wife. He really wanted me out of the picture so he could get her and our business. I don't think I could ever trust anyone again. Ever. I took a deep breath, looked at my nearly empty rum drink, and decided it was time to mix another one. As I walked back to the cabin, an unpleasant thought crossed my mind. What am I going to do now? Where would I live? I knew I never wanted to see her again, so Virginia was out of the question. Where else could I go? And then it hit me. Why not stay here? I mean, certainly not at this resort, but why not stay here in Hawaii? This place was perfect, and I was sure it wasn't worth it to go back to Virginia, except for Maddie. She was away at college anyway and would probably understand me. I had a few more calls to make. I called Sandra next. She wasn't too pleased that I called right before she left. It was almost 6 o'clock in the evening on the East Coast. I apologize for the late call, Sandra, but I'll be brief. I want a divorce, but I want to change the situation so that the cause is her cheating. I want her to be hurt, and I don't want to pay her a dime in alimony if I don't have to. And I guess I caught her off guard because she paused for a moment before she spoke. Are you sure about this, James? Very. I just found out that her affair wasn't a one-time thing. I'm no longer willing to listen to her lies. Good. If Kurt has proof of her cheating for me, I can do it tomorrow and I'll call you with the details after she gets the subpoena. I've already asked Kurt to forward everything he has to you. As for notifying me, that won't be necessary. Just send me a quick text message when everything is ready. I don't need any details. Thanks again for everything. James, once again, I'm sorry about what happened, Ed, but I'll do my best to help sort it out. With those words, we both hung up. And just like that, my marriage began its final downfall. I was about to start wallowing in self-pity, but I decided it was time for Hakuna Matata. Screw her. She wasn't going to ruin my life anymore. I finished the last of my rum cocktail and made another. I could get used to this. I put the plate in the sink and sat back in my chair. Now that the main business was done, I needed to move on to the third item for the day. Find a new home. That was easier said than done, especially since I wasn't local. Where the hell was I supposed to live? Perhaps I should contact the concierge. They knew everything anyway. They get paid to know everything about everything, or find someone who does, right? I put on my sandals, took my drink with me, and walked down the walkway to the main building. The side doors swung open, and I was greeted by the hiss of the air conditioner by the door. The whiff of cool air from above was very pleasant, but didn't stop me from continuing on to my destination. The concierge desk was on the left, directly opposite the main entrance doors on the right. She sensed my approach and turned around with a genuine smile. "Good afternoon, sir. How can I help you today?" she asked. It cost me a great effort not to say the first thing that came to mind. She was gorgeous, and I wasn't having the purest of thoughts at that moment. She looked like a local, with long, wavy hair and a lush figure that complemented her flowy dress perfectly. I would have to keep my gaze averted to strike up a human conversation with her. "I hope you can help me. I'm only staying here for a few days, but I've decided that I really like it here and want to stay permanently. Can you tell me where I can find a place to stay for the night? I know it's a strange request, but my life has changed direction lately, and this place seems like the perfect place to start over." She paused for a moment before she spoke, apparently digesting the brief life story I had just laid out for her. "Sir, I'm not a real estate agent, but I can tell you that the overall cost of living here is quite high. Also, most of the houses in this neighborhood are overpriced. However, I can give you the name of someone to talk to about it. Would that be okay with you?" "Sure, thank you." She opened a book on her desk, found what she was looking for, and wrote something on a small piece of paper. She tore it off and held it out across the desk. "Here is the name of a woman I trust. Call her. Is there anything else I can help you with today?" "On second thought, yes. What would you like me to do for fun tonight?" "I was thinking of exploring the island, but I have no idea where to start. Also, just curious, what's the name of that unlabeled juice in the room?" Those questions were much easier for her to deal with. She talked about several options that were great for tourists, some starting here at the resort and others requiring a cab ride. She handed me several brochures as well as a handwritten note. I thanked her and turned to head back to my cabin. I could have sworn she threw me a lustful look, maybe even a wink when I thanked her. Maybe I was just wishful thinking. Leafing through the brochures, I found a few that I found very interesting. One was about a helicopter tour of the island. Another was about the military museums located everywhere. I would definitely visit at least the Arizona Memorial for that matter. Hey, I watched the movie Pearl Harbor too. There were a few others that I would review when I got back to the room. Of interest, however, was the handwritten note. The name of the juice, Lilikoi Passion Fruit. To find the house, Leah Mellon, 808-555-1234. Kim, 808-55-6789. I really wasn't ready to get back into the game, but I was flattered that she was flirting with an older guy like me. Either way, it was a nice self-esteem boost. I'd save that number for the future. I guess I had a few more calls to make. Today my phone was busier than any other day in my life. First, I called Leah, the real estate agent. I waited until I got back to the cabin before I called. She picked up the phone with a cheery, "Aloha, this is Leah." Her voice sounded beautiful. Would all women in Hawaii be like that? I began to think that this was the best decision I had ever made. I came back to the present. Hi, my name is James. I want to buy something more permanent than staying at this resort, and Kim from the concierge gave me your number. Would you mind helping me out? Sure, it would be my pleasure. Could you tell me in general terms what you need? I don't really need anything in particular. I probably need 2 bedrooms, but other than that, I haven't really thought about it yet. Okay, do you have any location preferences? Just somewhere close to the ocean. She giggled, and even I realized it was a corny joke. In all seriousness, I don't really care about any particular place. I'd consider somewhere secluded, but still close enough to civilization to feel human. Some sort of letter was heard on the other end. Okay, I'll prepare a list of possible places and we can meet to visit some of them. Does that sound good? Yeah, sounds great, thanks. I'll call you tomorrow. Aloha. She ended the conversation as pleasantly as she answered. I was really going to love it here. There was one last call to make. I had promised to call my daughter, and I would always try to keep my promises. I mixed another beach pineapple, now my own nickname, and walked down to the beach chair again. I sat down and pulled out my phone. I stared at the screen, looking at her contact picture in the phone book. She looked so much like her mother. I really hoped she hadn't inherited her crazy genes, too. The phone rang a few times and eventually went to her voicemail. I listened to her sing-song voice as she asked me to leave a message and she would call me back. I was halfway through writing a quick message when my phone beeped for an incoming call. She was calling me back? Strange that this doesn't happen more often, I thought to myself. I answered her return call and hung up on her voicemail. Hi, honey. I'm glad you called me back so quickly. I haven't even had a chance to leave you a message yet, I said, smiling. Hi, Daddy. Yeah, we've been a little busy, sorry. I could almost hear her blush over the phone. She said, we. I wonder if she meant she was with her girlfriend or her mother. I really didn't feel like talking to Caitlin, so I decided not to look for an answer. Oh, it's okay. I just wanted to check in on you and let you know I'm doing well. This place is really magical, and I hope you can come visit me sometime. Visit? She paused, and I realized I'd screwed up. Dad, what are you saying? Oh, shit. I needed to work on talking to people more easily. Honey, I've decided to move here permanently. I haven't found an apartment yet, but I'll start looking tomorrow. What? You can't move that far away. Now I'll never see you again. She sounded like she was about to burst into tears. Maddie, you can always come visit and I can help pay you sometimes. I can still visit you, you know? I'm sorry, but it's just something I have to do. Have to? Dad, I know Mom messed up, but do you really have to move halfway across the world? This was the conversation I was truly dreading. I didn't want to hurt my daughter, but at the same time I felt like I needed a fresh start, and I couldn't do that in Virginia. I hesitated with my answer, perhaps even too long. Dad, are you divorcing Mom? Oh my God, you're getting a divorce. She started crying into the tube, and I suppressed the tears within me. I hated to hear my little girl so sad. However, I would do my best to soften her up. Maddie, what I told you before remains true. I will probably always love your mom, but I will never be able to trust her again. As for you, I will always do everything I can to help you. I was serious when I said I wanted you to come visit me. Heck, bring your girlfriend here too. I really want to meet her, and I also want to see you. Heh, she giggled. Now you're trying to buy my happiness? Who, me? Never. She knew I was joking, but it was still nice to hear her laugh on the other end. I thought I heard another distinct female giggle in the background. Okay, you win. Since it's summer vacation, we have time. Send me the tickets and we'll be there. For future reference, her name is Sarah Jones. I had to pull the phone away from my ear as I heard 2 very happy ladies screaming on the other end. Whoa! We're going to Hawaii! Finally, the noise died down and we said our goodbyes. I knew I had a lot of work ahead of me, but the least I could do was continue to show her that I loved her. Once I was done with that call, I leaned back in the chaise lounge and finished my drink. It was still only the middle of the day here, but it was already getting a little late at home. I was still feeling slightly jet-lagged, but not yet enough to get ready for bed. I got up, went back into the house and looked through the brochures again. There was a brochure about a helicopter tour. There was another one about snorkeling, which sounded fun. but probably required a little more effort on my part than I would like right now. I saw the military museum's page again and put it on the very top of the stack. I saw an offer for a bus tour of the city that looked interesting and suited my lazy, rum-fueled mood quite well. After looking at a few others, I decided to opt for the bus tour of the city. It sounded fun and didn't require much effort on my part. I called the concierge, and Kim was very helpful in helping me organize it. That girl could get me in trouble while I was here. After locking up the cabin, I headed to the front desk. The bus was already waiting there, so I just got on it and off we went. The tour was 2 hours long and we drove all over the city. There were a lot of cute stores, as well as a few restaurants that I absolutely had to try. I memorized the name of one of them, Island Jim's, which seemed like the perfect place for tonight's dinner. It barely stood out against the facades of the buildings surrounding it and looked like a hole in the wall. I almost imagined it was the kind of place that would have made it onto one of my favorite cooking shows on the cooking channel, with that guy and the crazy hair. I was dropped off at a resort where I changed clothes to go to dinner. I took a cab and sat at the bar. The staff was very friendly and the food was excellent. I ended up eating local tuna cooked by AHI and a local fruit with a name I can't pronounce. While I sat and ate, I did my usual people watching. There was a group of 4 people sitting near the door who looked like muscular athletes. They were laughing, drinking, and looked like they had finished eating a long time ago. Looking over to a table a little further away from them, I saw 3 women eating various fish dishes. To the right of the door sat a couple holding hands and drinking wine after dinner. Farther down the bar from me sat an older gentleman who seemed content to chat with the young woman behind the bar. I guess even an older guy like that has a chance here in Hawaii. I signaled to the bartender that I needed another beer, and as she brought it to me, the guy at the end of the bar hopped off his stool and came over to me. He climbed onto the stool next to me and held out his hand. "Howard Denton," he said as I shook the outstretched hand. "James Holmes," I replied. "So what brings you to this solitary paradise?" he asked. Wow, he quickly got me through to my bones with that question. I realized the truth might shock me, but I wanted to see his reaction. Anyway, my business partner tried to kill me and somehow convinced my wife that I cheated on her, which I never did. On top of that, she had been cheating on me with him for God knows how long. And all this just days before our wedding anniversary? He just started laughing. I wasn't expecting that reaction, but there was definitely healing in his laughter. He laughed so hard it was contagious, and I laughed along with him. This is probably the most confusing situation I've ever heard of, and I need to know. My wife left me 3 years ago for a much younger guy. Too bad the little boy didn't have any money and she didn't get the fortune from me that she had hoped for. Ha 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 ha. He continued laughing and slapped me hard on the back. "James, you just made my day. Let me buy you a drink." Who am I to argue with free booze and a fun conversationalist? We sat down at the table and had another drink, talking about how the women in our lives were suffering. He seemed to be in a good mood, and I felt envious that my wounds were still so fresh. At least the alcohol was helping with it all so far. After the bartender informed us that last call had come, I stood up and held out my hand. "It was my pleasure. Pleasure. To meet you," I whispered. I hoped he understood and that his drunk-ass translator was working. "Come here," he said, pulling me to him and giving me a manly hug. "You're fun to be with. I mean, you were fun to talk to." His drunken mumbling was about the same as mine, so we were in the same company. At those words, he hiccuped and, holding each other, we headed out the door. The bartender called out to us, asking if she needed to call a cab. Howard waved and shouted, "No, thank you." One of the most surreal days of my life was ending on a completely drunken note. Howard and I walked slowly down the street. He turned us toward the marina, and a worry built up in my clouded brain that he was going to rob me and throw me in the water. I would have worried more, but I was too drunk to worry. We walked down the pier to a very large yacht. It had maybe 3 decks over the water, and the top one had one of those extra rudders that you can use to steer the boat, besides the one in the main deck house. The boat had a lot of portholes and looked like a small Arab boat on the launch deck. "Welcome to my humble abode," he muttered, waving his hand broadly toward the boat. "Would you like to come aboard?" he hiccuped. "Aboard?" I had nowhere to go, so I nodded in agreement. That nod was a big mistake as the world began to spin. I grabbed the side of the boat so I could see straight again, and then slowly climbed aboard. We walked inside to a large living room-style cabin, and I settled into a cushioned chair. He pulled out another bottle, unlabeled, but poured a dark brown liquid into it. Without a word, he poured into 2 full shot glasses without ice and held one out to me. I vaguely remember us finishing them, and that was the end of it. I don't even remember what we might have talked about. I woke up to the cries of seagulls and the slight rocking of the water. I vaguely remember sitting in a soft chair and drinking some very tasty rum. My head was spinning, and my mouth was as dry as the desert. I stood up, and after calming down, I walked over to the small refrigerator next to the couch and pulled out a bottle of water. I drank half of it and then stopped to take a deep breath. I really needed to cut back on the drinking, of course. That's what everyone says when they're hungover. Looking around the marina, I saw a lot of other boats. Some were as big as the Howard, but most were small to medium-sized. The sun was just setting behind the distant mountain peaks, and the breeze was a welcome relief. Barring a raging headache, the scene was breathtaking. I heard some grumbling from the stairs leading below deck, and decided that Howard had awakened in the same condition as I had, or worse. He rose, stumbling, and muttered some words I couldn't make out. He sank down on the couch, lifted his head, and started laughing. "Son," he looked right at me. "That was one hell of a night." I agree, but right now I could use some coffee and ibuprofen. He nodded and walked over to the cabinet, pulling a bottle out of there. He tossed it to me and then walked over to another tall cabinet against the opposite wall. He opened it, and behind it was a cleverly hidden coffee pot. I opened the pill bottle and shook out 4 pieces while he brewed the coffee. I drank the pills, washing them down with the remaining water, and sat down in the chair I'd slept in. "Any plans for today?" he asked. "Actually, yes. I need to tie up some loose ends in Virginia and look for a place to live here. Right now I'm just staying at the White Sands Resort." Howard hummed and sat down on the couch to wait for his coffee. "If you get any free time or need any help, give me a call." He pulled a business card out of his shirt pocket and held it out to me. At that moment, several thoughts raced through my stupefied brain. Why would he have the cards in his shirt pocket? How does he still have them there after all the drinking we did last night? And finally, what does he need from me other than a drinking buddy? "Sure," I answered instead. I was in no condition to have a long conversation. He handed me a mug of coffee and took one for himself. We sat and drank in silence, just enjoying the breeze and the quiet serenity of the harbor. After a while, he looked at me and said, "So, what are you going to do now? Last night you said you were selling your business, so what's next?" When he wanted to, he got straight to the point. He must have been one hell of a businessman until he retired. Thinking about it, I don't remember telling him about selling the business. I must have been really drunk and passed out. Honestly, I don't know yet. I've decided to move here, but I haven't gotten to that point yet. If I can find a way, I'd love to fly. He nodded and sank into thought. "All right, if you need anything until you figure it out, let me know." With those words, I thanked him and stepped off the boat. I took a cab back to the resort where I went straight to my cabin and collapsed on the bed. Sleep was wonderful until my phone rang again. "Hello," I answered, tucking myself into my pillow. "Mr. Holmes, I was calling to see if we were going house hunting today." Oh shit, I'd completely forgotten. "Yes, of course, I'm running a little late, but I can meet you in about 30 minutes, okay?" "Sure, see you then." Shit. I rushed into the bathroom, taking a quick shower and putting on clean clothes. Brushing my teeth quickly, I ran to the concierge desk. Kim was there again, looking as gorgeous as ever. "Hi, Kim. Can you help me out? Your friend Leah is meeting me, and she told me to ask you where she likes to get coffee. That's where I'm supposed to meet her." "Ah, yes, Mr. Holmes. She likes to go to an establishment 2 blocks from here called Kona Hut. Honestly, it's just a regular coffee shop, but it's a really nice place." I thanked her and ran out the front door. I caught a cab to take me 2 blocks away, for which I was very grateful. These blocks were nothing like the neighborhoods in Virginia. This resort was at least 2 miles from the nearest cross street, and the second one was another 2 miles away. I tipped the cabbie, and he pulled away as I entered the house. A woman, obviously a native of the island, came up from a table by the door, She was gorgeous, with swarthy skin and smooth, raven black hair. She smiled radiantly and waved at me, inviting me to take a chair at the table across from her. Spread out in front of her were at least 10 different printouts of the houses I guessed we were going to see. "Hello, Mr. Holmes. I'm Leia," she said softly. "Hello, and please call me James." "Okay, let it be James. First, let's go through them and narrow it down to the ones you really like. There's no point in checking out a place if it seems ugly to you. I picked them based on what you and I talked about yesterday." "Sounds good to me. Looks like it's going to be Hakuna Matata again today, my new daily mantra." We sat down and went over the 10 she had pre-selected for me. She talked about all the intricacies, as well as possible problems with some of them. I wasn't afraid to do some minor renovations, but I didn't want to get an outright lemon house either. I narrowed the list down to 3 houses I wanted to see in person, and we agreed to meet at a coffee shop the next day, early enough to have time to visit before lunch. I returned to the resort and decided that now I needed a nap. I woke up a few hours later, still feeling the effects of the drink, but not as bad as before. I took a few more ibuprofen tablets, drank a bottle of water, and walked out onto the sand of the beach. I sat in a chair for a while, just relaxing and listening to the waves. When it was about 3 in the afternoon, my phone rang. "James, it's Tony. There's an update on Cyrus, but I'm just going to send you a link to an article about it. I want to tell you that he won't give you any more trouble. The feds are still going through your company records, but from what they told me, there is no evidence that he used a legitimate business for his illegal activities. The only thing they have found so far is evidence at his warehouse where he planned to use airplanes to fly to Mexico. Due to everything that has happened, the judge ruled in your favor and granted the request to dissolve the partnership. It is now legally 100% yours. Would you like me to pull the trigger on the West Coast proposal, after the feds have sorted it out, of course?" I was stunned. Things were moving fast, but I had never imagined things would happen so quickly. Frankly, I was beyond excited at the thought of having to break this last bond. It made me sad, because the company was like a second child to me after Maddie, but I also felt like I had to get rid of it. Just thinking about it reminded me of Cyrus and how we started this business together. Well, Hakuna Matata. I'll have to read that article later. Probably after rum. Lots of rum. Yes, you're welcome. Thanks again for everything, Tony. After such wonderful news, I felt a rush of energy again. I got up, went back to the main building, and had an early dinner at the on-site restaurant. I checked my phone and opened the link Tony had sent me about the news in Cyrus. There was a large picture of the motel. I assumed it was the same motel that Kurt had said he was hiding out in. Anyway, there were several police cars from different agencies and departments in the picture, and even a SWAT van. The article was short on details, but basically said that the FBI coordinated the raid on the motel with the help of the ATF and local law enforcement, responding to an anonymous tip about fugitive Cyrus Black. Authorities believe he is armed and extremely dangerous. The raid turned up a lot of evidence, but the fugitive is still at large. It seems he's finally figured out how to run like a criminal. I was concerned that he might cause trouble in the future, but for now, he was out of the picture. With so many cops keeping an eye on him, I at least hoped he'd stick around for a while. I had a great night's sleep that night and woke up refreshed. I took one last look at the 3 houses we had chosen and then went to meet Leah. She took me to all 3 houses, and honestly, all 3 were just fine. I didn't fall in love with any of them, at least not enough to buy. She took me to lunch where she asked me a few questions and said she would continue to hunt for me. Leah took me to a resort and said she would keep in touch. And for the next few days, I didn't get out of my lounge chair. True, a few times I got up and went to the gym so I wouldn't get flabby from the delicious food and booze. After a few days sitting on the chaise lounge, it hit me. I was watching the birds go by and a few boats when I realized the answer was right in front of me. I called Leah and asked her to look for boats for sale that could fit into the space I was asking for. She laughed until she realized I was being serious and said she would contact me. I'm sure boats aren't her specialty, but it wasn't a big deal. It took another 2 days, but she came to the resort and sat with me on the beach. She showed me several options and I immediately saw the one I wanted. Of course, I would still go see it in person, but I fell in love with it almost immediately. The picture showed a tall and proud wooden boat. The hull was all white, with dark railings and trim all around. The plaque stated that the boat was 36 feet long, had 5 berths and 2 heads, and had been launched in 1972. I guessed that berths meant bedrooms and heads meant bathrooms. The ship had a new Cat diesel engine and had recently cruised to Alaska and back. Her name was Lady of the Night, and she was offered at a price I was quite happy with. We took a personal tour of the old girl, and my goodness, she was gorgeous. The interior had been restored and cared for as well as the exterior. It was obvious that love had been put into the care of this boat. I told Leah I wanted her and to work her magic and get her for me. I spent the rest of the day on cloud nine thinking about how much fun I would have on this boat. Now all I had to do was decide what I was going to do for the rest of my life. I felt like I was asking myself the old question, what do you want to be when you grow up? I knew without a doubt that I still wanted to fly. It was my first love, my first passion. Unlike the cheating wife I loved, flying would never let me down. I would never work for the government again, that was absolutely certain. That asshole from FEMA just got it into his head that you can't trust anyone. Maybe I could do something for myself. I was wondering if there are any charter services around here. Maybe I could find one of the small islands where a few people live or have tourists and transport them. I thought of a Harrison Ford movie and thought that would be fun. Anyway, food for thought. I'd ask Kim. This woman knew everything, plus she was always a pleasure to talk to. Despite all this, I needed to finish up with official business so I could get back to my beach pineapple drinks. Surprisingly, those drinks never made me feel hungover, except when I was hanging out with Howard and drinking that dark stuff. The juice must be hydrating me? Guess it didn't matter. I went to the resort's main building, their mobile office, and printed out the power of attorney document Tony had sent me. I reread it twice, checking to see if I was giving him too much authority. It was exactly as I had requested, namely that it gave him only the authority to transfer assets and funds in connection with the sale of my business and partnership. I filled out all the necessary information and took it to the main desk. I asked Kim if she could notarize it, and she said she could. I signed the document, she stamped it by pulling it out of the desk drawer, and then signed it herself. Is there anything this woman can't do? She was even able to arrange to have the letter sent by priority mail back to Tony in Virginia. While she was preparing the envelope, I asked her about local charter flights. She said there were several, but it all depended on the destination. She handed me 2 brochures advertising flight services to some islands, and I thanked her. I would make my own inquiries about how far and how often these services flew. That night's sleep was again fairly restful. Over the next few days, time seemed to fly by unnoticed. The sale was to take place as soon as the feds finished their investigation. Cyrus was still on the run, and Caitlin was handed the paperwork. She first tried calling me, then texted me. I replied with a simple message, asking to speak to me through Sandra. Had I acted like a coward by not talking to her? Probably. I justified myself by saying that she would try her best to talk me out of the divorce, and I had no desire to stay married to her any longer. Eventually, I would have to talk to her, but I was going to put it off as long as possible. It wasn't easy, but with most of my savings and my retirement fund cashed in, I was able to buy the boat. I paid to have it temporarily moored on Oahu and worked with the locals to get it cleaned up and ready for occupancy. The main sticking point was actually my wife. She didn't want a divorce and at first thought she could talk me out of it. Thankfully, she wasn't trying to force counseling on us or anything, but she did think she could convince me that she loved me enough to reconcile after her betrayal. Anyway, through my lawyer, I told her to go screw herself and find Cyrus if she really wanted to have fun that badly. I know it was a low blow, but I felt she deserved it. Eventually, I had to go back to Virginia to settle things once and for all. I spent as much time with Maddie as I could and promised her again that I would call or email her often. I did have to see Caitlin once, though, and it was the hardest 30 minutes of my life. I know I messed up, but I want to spend the rest of my life making it up to you. I only love you. I don't want this divorce, she pleaded with me. So what's in it for you, Cyrus, then? How long have you two been having fun? I know it wasn't just the one time I saw you. I swear it was just one time, James. As crazy as it sounds, I wanted you to walk in on us so you could feel the pain I felt when I thought you were cheating on me. I know how stupid that sounds now, but that's what I felt at that moment. I'm sorry for what I did. If I could take it all back, I would. Okay, what about a couple nights after I left town? I know he used to come here and stay the night. Did he just sleep on the couch that night? She turned pale and her eyes got very wide when she heard this. Yes, that's what I thought. You really think I'm that stupid, don't you? I've been blind to it for a long time. I guess love works that way. I gave her a hard look. He must have been really good if he was worth giving up everything for. James, I'll do anything. Please don't leave me. It meant nothing to me. And I'll never do it again. I'm so… Shut up, I yelled. I'd had enough of her shit. Enough. I don't want to hear it anymore. You drove away the life we were supposed to have together. You did that. You destroyed the one thing I believed in, no matter how shitty everything else was. You killed my love for you, just like he tried to kill me. After that, she just started sobbing. It was almost comical. If it hadn't happened to me, I wouldn't have believed it at all. How could such a great love lead to such a death? Those two must have worked something out, or she must have been really stupid to fall for his crap after knowing him for so many years. I left her like that, telling her it was over between us. Before I left town, I gave Maddie some tickets to come back later in the summer. Caitlin wouldn't get her wish and we'd be divorced whether she liked it or not. While I was in town, I talked to both attorneys and even stopped by to see Sean. I mentioned to him that I was thinking of starting my own charter service in Hawaii and asked if he would be willing to help me. He asked if he might consider it, and of course I told him to take as much time as he needed. After all of this, I returned to Hawaii, my new home. The yacht was perfect for me, and I loved the quiet of the ocean at night. Eventually, the feds ended their investigation and allowed Tony to finalize the sale to Rapid Relief Logistics. I just asked him to make sure the new owner took care of the three who still worked for the company. Jenny, Tammy, and Sean were great employees and didn't deserve to be sent out on their asses for what Cyrus was up to. At this point, I didn't care if Cyrus was found. He'd lost everything, and all for my wife. I hoped he would enjoy being on the run. When I returned, I began to explore the possibility of starting my own charter service, but it would have to be aimed at the smaller islands. There were already several charter services between the largest islands, and I wasn't sure if it was worth competing with them yet. I needed to learn more about the area first. The only change I made after returning from Virginia was to move the mooring from Oahu Island a little further down the chain, to Molokai Island. I figured it was in the center of all the islands and would be a good place to start my small island hopping service. Plus, it was more secluded, had fewer people on it, and was beautiful in its natural features. As soon as the RRL sale is finalized, I will start working on it. In the meantime, I just sat on the deck of my boat and enjoyed beach pineapple. Finally, I felt I needed some human companionship, so I called Kim. I decided I would have fun and at least ask her out. She accepted a dinner invitation before I even had a chance to propose to her. I took her to Halewa Joe's, a seafood place she had recommended to me. The outside of the place didn't look like much, but the inside was pretty nice. When we were seated at a table on the back patio, it took my breath away. In front of us was a stunning view of a small lake with a white dock that stretched out in the middle. The mountains around us were just as colorful, and the thick greenery surrounding us seemed perfect. We sat down, and I decided it was time to get to know more about each other. Up until this point, all I knew was that she was very smart and worked as a concierge. "So, Kim, you've lived here your whole life?" She nodded. "Yes, my family is mostly from here, from Kaneohe, but my grandmother lives north of here, in Ahuimanu. I've been to most of the islands, but I haven't traveled farther. Where are you from?" "I lived in Virginia until recently. I decided to sell my business there and moved here. As for the rest of my family, that's a long story that I can share another time. For now, I'll just say that I'm divorced, and I have a daughter that I love very much." It was time to change the subject, which I did. Right now, I live on Molokai, at least on the yacht moored there. I intend to open a charter flight service and continue to fly. It's my real passion in life. Her smile lit up the room. I think she was happy to hear that I had moved here instead of staying just a tourist. Dinner was brought over, and we enjoyed the easy chit-chat that occurs when two people get to know each other. She turned out to be very intelligent and so beautiful that I held my gaze on her twice. When we were done, I put the bill money and tip on the table and we left. Overall, the dinner was just refreshing. I hadn't been on a first date in decades, so it was nice to know that I could still talk to a beautiful woman without mumbling. I drove her back to her apartment and she invited me out for a drink. I secretly hoped that she would accept so that we could continue this wonderful evening. And so it happened. This evening, we got down to it. Waking up the next morning, I found her bed empty. I got up and she was already in the kitchen drinking the coffee she had made. She had a serious look on her face and she said, "We need to talk." I was no longer in a good mood and was thinking the worst. No man likes to hear words like that. "James, I really like you. Last night was wonderful and I hope it was as good for you as it was for me." "Kim, it was amazing. You are an amazing woman and you made me a very happy man last night." I smiled, remembering it all. "I'm glad to hear that. I just want you to know that I'm not looking for anything serious right now, okay?" An almost anxious, expectant expression appeared on her face as she waited for my answer. In the meantime, I was afraid that after one night she would say she wanted to move in with us or get married or something. After all, we were on the same page. I smiled and replied, "Kim, I'm not in a position to want anything serious right now either. I really like you and I hope we can see each other more often, but I'm not thinking about marriage and kids just yet." I finished with a chuckle and a smile. She smiled, apparently having heard the right answer. "Well, of course I want to keep dating you, you big dummy," she giggled. I told her I would call and fly over to see her very soon. I pulled myself together and left her with another passionate kiss, the kind that almost made me pull back in the door. I returned to my new home on Molokai and was on cloud nine the whole time. When I got my boat back in place, I noticed something funny. The mooring next to mine was occupied by Howard's huge boat. I walked up to it and shouted, "Ahoy!" It took a minute, but Howard found a window and looked out to see who was there. When he saw me, he came out of the cabin onto the deck and waved at me. "Come aboard, James. It's good to see you, my friend." I was at a loss as to why he was here, but I didn't care. He was my only friend here at the moment, and as far as I could tell, a good friend. We made our way to his quarters and took our seats. I took the same cushioned chair, and he preferred the couch. "James, I like your choice of port. This really is a great place to set up store. It was nice on Oahu, but it's serene here." "Thank you, Howard. I'm glad you like it." "You're probably wondering why I'm here." "The thought had crossed my mind," I replied with a smirk. "I mean, I know we can both appreciate the finer things that can be distilled, right?" "Haha. See, that's why I like you. I actually have a proposition for you. I know you said you've just started looking for places to start a new charter service, and I'd like to help you out. I have an offer to sell an airplane. The pilot is retiring and just wants some extra money to help with a move somewhere in the Midwest." "I'm listening," I said, encouraging him to continue. "I don't know the details, but he said it's a 1957 Beaver, whatever that means, and it's been very well cared for. I must confess I have a vested interest in helping you with it. I have friends who want to come visit me for a very unusual vacation. They want to go to one of the small islands that are uninhabited for a couple nights and camp on the beach. If I can help you get that airplane, could you help me? I have guests like this from time to time, and it would be very helpful to me to have a business partner who could fly with us as needed." I thought for a moment. I would need to register here and get a good set of cards and stuff, but there was no reason why I couldn't start my business with exclusive clients like this one. I looked at him, smiled, and said, "Sounds great to me. Of course, I need to take care of the official business, register myself and the airplane with the government, and study maps of the area and such. When are your friends arriving?" "They're flying into Honolulu next week." He must have seen the shock on my face, so he continued, "Sorry for such short notice, but I'm really stuck here and could use a favor." "Okay, Howard. I can take care of the paperwork tomorrow. Contact your guy and tell him I want to take a look at this airplane of his. If it's a sound machine, I'll consider buying it. Now, how about we get a drink and talk about something a little less important?" He grinned. "Sounds like a great idea." So that's what we did. We drank and I ended up falling asleep on my couch, never making it to my bunk. The next day turned out to be truly miserable. Damn Howard and his gloomy rum. I had to stick to my own drinks from now on. Not only was I suffering from a hangover, but dealing with government officials was slow and tedious. They required me to fill out a ton of paperwork, as well as a bunch of proof of my previous experience and pilot's license. Fortunately, I had my license, but all my flight logs remained in the state of Virginia. I decided to call Sean. He and I talked for a while. He told me about his new boss and I told him about my new plans. Sean, do you want to work for me again? I can't promise a big paycheck, but I have an extra room on the yacht where you can stay, and the location will more than make up for the temporary pay cut. You know, that sounds like a pretty good idea. This new guy, he's not bad, but he's not the best either. He's already told Jenny and Tammy that he doesn't really need them since he has his own people in the office taking care of things. He really only needs the airplanes, a mechanic to keep them running, and a few pilots. He hired two new pilots, a man and a woman. Both of them are assholes, and I mean that in the nicest way possible. Both of them have their noses stuck so high in the air, I wonder how they can still breathe. I laughed a little at his description. Tell you what, talk to the girls and see if any of them want to move here. I know Tammy has a husband and kids, so it might be difficult, but Jenny was single, right? Yes, but I'll talk to both of them anyway. Tammy might actually be okay with the move because she just told me yesterday that she caught her lazy husband having fun with her. While she was working hard, he was at home entertaining the neighbor girl, even though the girl was only 19. Damn scum if you ask me. I was forced to agree. Holy shit. Talk to them and let me know. I'm on Molokai right now, and I've already got a line on a plane I need to check out. I could use some help and some familiar faces wouldn't hurt either. Also, I need you to send me all my flight logs from the office so I can register with the state. Okay, I'll get them right away. James, don't look at that airplane until I get there, okay? Sure thing, buddy. I'll send you the tickets for tomorrow's flight and then we can discuss the details. Also, let me know what the ladies want to do. We hung up and I felt much better knowing that at least my friend Sean had my back. The next day started without incident. I had sent him the electronic ticket receipts the night before, so he should be flying somewhere over the Pacific by now. I spoke briefly with Howard about Sean's arrival, as well as his friend and the airplane. He assured me that the airplane was serviceable, but I told him I wanted to check it out with my friend to help me. Sean arrived late in the afternoon and took a small plane from the Honolulu airport to our local airstrip on Molokai. I took a cab to the airport and waited for him. As soon as he got off the plane, I waited for him to give him another big hug. He wasn't a particularly sentimental guy, but after so many experiences and a long separation, it was only natural. He and I had been through a lot together, that's for sure. We took a cab to the dock, and I showed him his bunk. He threw his suitcase in there, and we went to Howard's. He called a friend and said the plane would be about an hour later, since he had to fly from another island. We waited on Howard's boat drinking iced tea. Hydrating before dehydration is a good thing every now and then, right? After about an hour of idle chatter, we heard the roar of an engine as the seaplane approached the dock. Apparently, he was a good pilot and brought it right up to the dock. We walked out to the plane and it looked like it was in immaculate condition. The pilot opened the door and stepped out, shuffling one foot after the other. The woman piloting the plane looked to be in her late 50s and was still gorgeous for her age. She walked over to Howard, shook his hand, and then turned to me. You must be James, right? She held out her hand and I took it. I'm Martha, but everyone calls me Marty. Nice to meet you, Marty. I shook the outstretched hand. This airplane looks amazing. I was a little worried when I found out it was a 1957 model, but it doesn't look its age at all. Neither does the pilot, I thought to myself. Well, thank you. I did all the restoration work myself, most of it in the last few years, she said, glowing with pride. Do you mind if my friend and I take a closer look? I asked. She only waved at the bird, smiled, and stepped aside, Howard. No sooner had we gotten inside than they were having some sort of whispered conversation. The inside was very well furnished. All the seats had white leather upholstery, and the gauges on the control panel looked new. Even the windows were in great condition, not scratched like I expected. Sean got out and opened the engine hatch and looked inside and saw the 627 SMOH motor. He fiddled around, fiddled with a few connections and ran his hands over one of the propeller blades. Sean had me turn the control knobs and rudder pedals a few times and made sure all the parts moved easily and effortlessly. There were no squeaks or other noises that might indicate tired mechanical parts, although he would probably remove some parts to visually make sure everything was in order before letting me fly it. After about 20 minutes of inspection, he looked at me and grinned. I turned back to the pilot and smiled. Marty, I think we like her. What do you want for her? She looked like she was deep in thought for a moment. I was asking 450,000 for her, but I'll take even 400 for you. It was a lot of money, but perhaps it was worth it. On the mainland, you could get at least 500,000 for these airplanes in this condition. Marty, if you can get down to 375, I think we have a deal. I think I can go down to that. We agreed and went to Howard's cabin for a drink. Marty limited herself to one drink so she could make the flight home in time. She briefly told us about her time in the islands and that her husband of almost 30 years had just passed away from cancer. She decided it was time to return to the mainland to be closer to her grandchildren. I sympathized with her loss, but at the same time thought it was really great that she had a wonderful family to spend the rest of her life with. We agreed that I would pick up the plane as soon as the financing ran out, and we said our goodbyes. She sailed away from the dock and then accelerated and took off towards her island. Sean and I said goodbye to Howard and returned to our boat. Sleep came slowly that night. The weather got a little worse than usual, and a storm blew through that always made the boat rock. The next few days were stormy, but eventually things cleared up. It took another week to complete the financial paperwork, but I was now the proud owner of a 1957 de Havilland DHC-2 Beaver seaplane. Sean and I took the boat on a day trip to her island. He drove the boat back to our dock and I piloted the airplane. The old airplane was a pleasure to fly and gave me absolutely no trouble at all. Of course, I got back before he did, so I hung out with Howard until Sean drove the boat back to the dock. Over the next few weeks, we got all the official requests and licenses in. Our business, Puddle Jumpers, was born. Jenny, the office clerk, decided to stay in Virginia and took a job with FedEx. Tammy, our former office manager, decided that she and her 12-year-old daughter needed to start a new life away from her unfaithful husband. Hawaii was quickly becoming the place everyone wanted to go to make a fresh start. I helped her move to the island and she rented a place in town. She occupied a small 2-room commercial space with us, claiming, of course, a larger office for herself. I used the other room, and Sean almost always stayed with me when he wasn't working on the airplane. True, he found a few other part-time jobs at the marina to supplement his income. All in all, we weren't busy at all, and we loved it. It was about 2 months later when I received a package in the mail. My divorce had been finalized the day before. It was a somber day, but I knew it signaled the official beginning of the rest of my life. That night, Sean and I decided that the little tiki hut bar on the beach needed our attention. He always had my back, and he knew I needed to go and completely forget that night. In fact, the bits I remember were pretty funny. I stayed away from tequila this time, but the spiced rum worked on me almost as badly as the last time. We both woke up with terrible hangovers and promised each other to stay away from that tiki hut for a while. About a week later, my daughter was finally due to come visit. She was going to spend a week at my place, right before the start of a new semester at college. I made 2 beds for them, although I was sure one of them would just be a glorified closet. I also went to the store to make sure my galley was as well stocked as possible. I picked them up at the Honolulu airport and was going to take them to my home on Molokai by seaplane. When I saw them exit through security, I rushed over to her and gave her a big hug. I missed her very much and told her so. Maddie, oh my God, I missed you so much. I looked at her friend and smiled. And who is this beautiful lady? Daddy, this is my girlfriend, Sarah Jones. Sarah, this is my dad. It's a pleasure to finally meet you, Mr. Holmes. After meeting your wife, pardon me, I meant to say. Well, anyway, I was really looking forward to it. The poor girl looked so nervous I had to rescue her. Time to get her used to my motto and hopefully set the tone for the entire next week. Please call me James or Daddy if that's more comfortable for you. While you're here, I want you both to just relax and enjoy yourselves. If you need anything, let me know and I'll get it all for you. Well, ladies, grab your things and we can head to the local terminal. I'll explain everything else on the way. With those words, they ran to get their bags and met me at the local terminal. I say local terminal, but it was actually a couple rows of seats with benches next to a sliding door overlooking the tarmac. There was a counter, which was usually deserted, and that was it. Oh, and a guard at the door to keep the kids from running out. We stepped out onto the sidewalk and I led them to the plane. Like a seaplane, it had pontoons, but if necessary, landing wheels could be extended out of these floats to land on a real runway. I loaded their stuff into the hold and we sat down and buckled in. We took off, and I pointed the nose of the plane toward Molokai. So, are you two looking forward to next semester? Definitely, Mr. H. I mean, Dad. Sorry, it's going to take some getting used to, Sarah said with a blush on her cheeks. Maddie's mom usually prefers either Caitlin or Mrs. H. I was surprised to hear that she kept my last name, but oh well. I didn't want her to die, a horrible death anymore, but I also didn't want to be around her. Don't worry, I need to get used to it too. Anyway, it's fine. We moved in together and school this year shouldn't be as bad as last year, Maddie finished. I remembered well her complaints about exams and the stress she was feeling. I was very happy to hear that things were getting better, at least in that respect. Maddie, Sarah, I want you both to have a great time while you're here. Unless you want to go somewhere else, I've cleaned and set up the rooms on my boat for you to stay. I've made 2 rooms, but I'm not old enough to think you'll actually sleep separately. Use one of them as a glorified closet or something. They both blushed at that, and my daughter whimpered, as usual. Dad! It was mostly for show, but still hilarious. We all started laughing about it. It felt good to laugh with her again. It had been too long. Once we get there, we'll get your stuff, and then we'll go meet my roommate, Howard. You guys are going to love hanging out with him. He's awesome. After that, I'll take you guys out to dinner. Sound good? Yup, they both replied in unison. My intuition told me that they probably did that a lot, and it was a good thing, I guess. We made the rest of the drive, chatting mostly about college life. The girls, mind you, the women, were very happy together. Anyone could see that. Now, I'm going to have to get used to thinking of my daughter as a woman. We landed on the water, which was a first for them, so of course they were thrilled. After tying the airplane to the dock, we walked to my boat. Papa, oh my gosh, is this your boat? My daughter exclaimed. Yes, it's totally mine. I let Sean, my mechanic and friend, use one of the bunks. You remember him from Virginia? Oh yeah, I think I do. That's cool, Dad. So which room is ours? I led them under the deck and showed them their rooms and where the head was. I pointed out Sean's bunk and mine, and then took them back to the galley. They sat down at the table while I showed them the simple kitchen. It only took 4 minutes. Ladies, go get settled, and when you're ready to meet my friends, come up on deck. They left for their room, and I mixed myself a beach pineapple and went up on deck to my favorite chair. I was sipping my drink, enjoying the noise of the seagulls flying around, when I heard a light groan coming from the lower deck. I turned on the radio and immersed myself in the 80s playlist I had set up on my iPod. At the moment, I was nodding my head to Down Under by the band Men at Work. The funny thing is, the music itself wasn't that great, but just listening to it brought back memories of when I was young and listening to it when it was new. After about 30 minutes, the ladies came over, looking a little flushed but otherwise happy. I didn't want to know what they were doing. Honestly, if it had been anyone other than my daughter, I would have been curious, but with her, I didn't even want to imagine it. Hey, are you guys ready to have a drink and meet my roommate? I asked. I knew they were both under the age of 21, but here on my boat, I'd let them dabble a little. Sure, what is it? Sarah asked. I call it beach pineapple. It's basically a rum and juice that I think tastes like pineapple. I made it up when I first came here and spent almost all my time at the beach. They're really delicious. I've made a batch in the galley, if you'd like to go and pour yourself a glass. They did so and joined me on deck, each with a full glass. I led them out to the dock and we walked to Howard's boat. If my 36-foot boat impressed them, their eyes darted around at the sight of his huge yacht. Ahoy, Howard! Can we come aboard? Shouted I to him. Knowing him, one would have assumed he was already passed out below deck. I was pleasantly surprised when a gorgeous red-haired girl came up to the rail and waved us over. Come on up. Howard and Sean are here discussing the finer points of beer. Personally, I think all beer is the same and tastes like crap, but that's just my opinion. We climbed aboard and she held out her hand. My name is Tanya Pierce. My friends and I are spending a week in Hawaii, trying to forget about real life for a while and pretend we're normal. I was at a loss for words, knowing full well who Tanya Pierce was. She was a major star of the big screen, starring in several very popular movies. Her last movie, Windy City, was a thriller about a serial killer set in Chicago. I watched it, as I'm sure the rest of the known world did. I didn't realize Howard knew such famous people, but I suppose it shouldn't have surprised me that much. After all, he had connections. I finally found my voice. It's a pleasure to meet you, Tanya. My name is James, and yes, I know who you are. She smiled, though I'm sure she was used to being recognized everywhere. I guess that's the price of stardom. You said Howard and Sean are discussing beer? I need to see that, giving her an excuse to take her mind off the conversation about her. Sure, follow me. And off we went. She led us to his main cabin, where Sean sat in my usual chair and Howard sat in his usual spot on the couch. They were both holding a pint each of something dark and arguing about which was better and why. Tanya cleared her throat to get their attention, and Howard was the first to look up. Oh, welcome back, James. I assume one of these lovely ladies is your daughter, Madison? He was simply fascinated. Yes, and this one is my pride and joy, he pointed to Maddie. And this one is Sarah, her girlfriend. They're staying with me for the week. Ladies, this is Howard, my friend. And this guy is Sean, my best friend and mechanic, although sometimes I think he just sits there and just pretends to fix things. At that, I winked at Sean. He waved me off and then turned to the rest of the group. Welcome, ladies. Ignore your father, he's delusional, thinking he's the world's greatest pilot or something. The girls were still a little stunned to be in such company, so they just smiled and said, "Thank you." So, James, since you're here, you can help settle the dispute. Sean thinks the dark stout is better than my wheat beer. What do you think? Asked Howard. I think you're both nuts for sitting here arguing about the subtleties of beer when we could all be enjoying the sunshine, I replied, exaggerating the subtleties with air quotes. I looked at a smiling Tanya and asked, What about you, Tanya? Wouldn't you like to go out in the sunshine and enjoy this beautiful day? Hell yes. Let me get the others from the lower deck, put them in spacesuits, and we can all go out on the bay and swim or something. With those words, she ran down into the belly of the boat. See, at least she has her priorities straight. Guys, seriously, Tanya Pierce is here and you're arguing about beer? I laughed and walked over to my daughter. Ladies, why don't you both go back to my boat and get into your costumes? We're going to take this monster out on the water and really enjoy Hawaii like it was meant to be. It was truly going to be a Hakuna Matata day for everyone. End of part 1. Part 2 may be coming out in 10 hours. Write in the comments if you're waiting for it. Also, give a like under this video and subscribe to my channel. I hope you enjoyed this video.